If you need a shortcut to being the most informed person in the room, especially when the topic is, reality-bending metaphysics, spontaneous apparitions, and the inner life of atoms, you are in the right place.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping in for one of those truly seismic sessions.
Yeah.
An inflection point where some of the deepest metaphysical theory gets dramatically, physically proven right in front of witnesses.
This is a deep dive into high strangeness territory, no question.
Oh.
But we promise to keep it grounded, maybe a little chilling, and, infused with just enough humor to make these concepts stick.
Right.
We're moving beyond just theory into verifiable phenomena.
Our source material today is Session 68 of the Early Sessions Book 2 of the Seth Material, and it was recorded on a Monday, July 6, 1964.
And the context is so key here.
Yeah.
Joseph the recorder and Jane Rupert the medium had just made the initial payment on their new birch house.
Yeah.
So the air was just thick with this mixture of excitement, some financial anxiety, and for Jane, a palpable exhaustion.
And that exhaustion is important, isn't it? Because she'd reported Seth was, quote, buzzing around her all afternoon.
Which suggests this massive buildup of psychic energy.
Oh.
We also have a crucial outside witness, Bill McDonnell, whose entity name is Mark.
Right, Mark.
And Joseph made an absolute point of prioritizing objectivity in his notes, confirming that he, Jane, and Bill all agreed on the astonishing contents of what happened.
That effort toward objectivity is vital, especially when you consider our two main hooks for today. First, we're going to discuss Seth's declaration that multiple physically distinct versions of every single person and object in that room exist simultaneously, a true subjective reality matrix.
And second, the dramatic proof of that. Bill McDonnell actually witnessed a verified physical manifestation, a genuine apparition of Seth himself standing right in the apartment doorway.
Wow.
This isn't just theory anymore. This is a psychic event that was witnessed, drawn, and then confirmed by Seth.
We're going to unpack all the mechanics of how that manifestation happened and, what it says about the nature of matter itself.
Right.
And before we jump into the deep end, just a quick note. This deep dive will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
And one final piece of context, which I just love. Their cat, Willie, was unusually quiet before the session, but during the break, when all this phenomena was peaking, Willie became incredibly active, stalking and crying out. It suggests even the animal was reacting strongly to the shift in psychic energy in the room.
The pet was involved in the creation.
Your pet was involved.
Okay, let's unpack this foundational concept because it really dictates everything that follows. We start by challenging the most basic assumption about the physical world.
The separation between living and dead matter.
Exactly. Trees are alive, tables are dead. Seth comes right out and just says that division is arbitrary.
It's arbitrary because it's based entirely on our limited outer sensory perception of motion. I mean, if something looks like it moves or acts of its own accord, a person, an animal, we call it living.
Right, self-directive.
And if something looks static, like a rock or a wall, we call it inert.
So we've created this false dichotomy based entirely on speed and visibility. But Seth's clearer definition, it just removes that barrier. He says that all action is self-directed action to some degree, and therefore all matter should be termed as living matter.
And that just radically changes the philosophical foundation of our reality, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It means that the chair you're sitting in right now, the glass on your table, the concrete foundation of your building, they aren't passive lumps of material just waiting to be acted upon. They are active participants in their own existence.
Okay, so if everything is alive, what exactly allows billions and billions of atoms to suddenly decide to cooperate and form, a physical object that lasts for a human lifetime, like a desk or a car?
This brings us to a really crucial technical concept, the cooperation of atoms. And it's driven by something Seth calls capsule comprehension.
Capsule comprehension.
Yeah. We naturally assume that physical form is thrust upon matter, like liquid being poured into a rigid mold.
But the source states definitively that form is not thrust upon matter.
Precisely. To construct a physical object, the atoms and molecules must give their inner consent.
Inner consent.
They're sentient to some degree. They possess a low-level consciousness, which Seth refers to as their capsule comprehension. They have to use this comprehension to willingly form into a physical object under the direction of an individual creator, the consciousness overseeing the whole construction.
So if I am creating the desk through my expectations and my desires, The atoms making up that desk must collectively agree to hold the form of desk instead of air or water.
Exactly.
That sounds like a massive, continuous collective vote among particles.
It is a collective agreement, a specialized consensus at the atomic level, and it's all directed by a higher consciousness, you, the observer and creator. Without this atomic cooperation, without their inner consent, physical construction is impossible. The death wouldn't hold its form.
Okay, let's use the analogy Seth used in the session, which I think makes it so clear. Jane's iced coffee glass.
Right?
If I'm you, the listener, trying to grasp this, I now see that glass not as an object built in a factory, but as a temporary, localized manifestation of willingly cooperating sentient particles.
Mm-hmm. And they're responding to Jane's expectation that she needs a cold drink holder.
That's the perfect takeaway. It makes this abstract concept totally concrete for you. The glass willed itself into being.
Well, not independently, but in response to Jane's specific directive and expectation, utilizing the materials available. And here's the subtle but massive implication.
Okay.
If I am directing the atoms that make up my world, and you are directing the atoms that make up your world, then logically, we are not sharing one unified physical object.
So the fundamental sentience of all matter is the prerequisite for the next shocking revelation, the fragmentation of physical reality itself.
Yes.
If atoms are cooperating, they're doing so based on my unique individual directives, which means what I construct cannot possibly be identical to what you construct.
And that framework is the only way to understand how multiple, distinct physical realities can exist simultaneously in the same apparent space. The passive reality we assume is actually an active, ongoing creative process directed by highly specialized, constantly negotiating, sentient particles.
Now we take that concept of atomic cooperation and expand it out to the macro level. Here's where it gets really interesting, and it challenges our basic sense of consensus reality.
Right.
Seth uses that iced coffee glass that Jane prepared as the central exhibit in what we're calling the glass paradox.
And the standard assumption is, Joseph, Jane, and Bill are all looking at one single physical glass. Maybe they see it differently because of lighting or their mood.
Yeah, psychological relativity.
Exactly. Seth dismisses this entirely.
His core claim will it'll blow your mind. If 3 people view the glass, there are actually 3 individual physical glasses.
It's a statement about literal physical creation, not illusion.
Yeah.
He says, and this is so critical, the 3 of you each create your own glass. Each one exists in a different perspective, in an entirely different space continuum.
An entirely different space continuum. Okay, I have to ask the skeptical question here because this is where my mind starts to break.
Go for it.
If I create my glass and you create your glass, how do we avoid constant physical chaos? What prevents my hand from reaching through your version of the glass because it doesn't exist in my immediate constructed space?
That's the essential question, isn't it? And it forces us to detail the implications of these space continuums. They are not illusions. They exist spontaneously and simultaneously. They're parallel construction.
Oh, let's say.
The crucial limitation, which prevents the chaos you're describing, is Seth's declaration that no man can walk in another man's space perspective.
So, my physical senses are tuned only to the specific reality I constructed through my inner consent and expectation, using those cooperative atoms. I simply cannot perceive or interact with your specifically constructed physical reality, even if we are standing side by side.
Exactly. The moment you accept that matter is constructed under individual direction, you have to accept that your personal space continuum is exclusive. This goes so much deeper than, say, a man seeing an object differently because he's in a bad mood.
Right.
Seth is asserting that the person is creating an entirely different object, which their outer senses then perceive as solid. The creative act of consciousness comes before the observation.
If that's the case, how do we ever agree on anything? I mean, how do we even operate a shared physical apartment like the one Joseph and Jane are sitting in?
This is where Seth introduces the mathematical connection, the infinitesimal point of overlap. Our realities operate through these consensus points. Theoretically, there is an infinitesimal point where the different perspectives, Mark's, Joseph's, Rupert's, they overlap.
And this overlap is where our constructed realities momentarily synchronize.
That's it.
I like to think of this point of overlap like frequencies. We're all transmitting our own station, constructing our own song, but at certain key moments, the chair, the table, the human body, our frequencies harmonize so perfectly that we experience a momentary consensus. If we could perceive that point, we could theoretically tune into and see the other 2 physical glasses.
That's a powerful analogy. The reality we agree on, the shared apartment, the shared language, is the product of the overwhelming overlap of our personal space continuums. It's the highest common denominator of creation. Without that consensus point, the objects would just flicker out of perceived existence for the other observers.
This means our outer senses are not simply receiving neutral, objective data from out there. They're receiving feedback from the entirely different personalized object we just created.
Yes, based on our inner consciousness and expectations.
Wow.
And Seth pointed out a fascinating technical detail. Scientists are already struggling with this concept mathematically, even if they don't use the language of subjective creation.
Really?
Yeah, they're chasing the idea of interlocking personalized fields because their equations suggest this multiplicity. The map is already there. The metaphysical explanation simply provides the missing variable, consciousness.
It's truly mind-bending. If the entire structure of the physical world requires atomic consent, and that consent is directed by individual consciousness, then physical reality is not a single solid given.
Not at all.
It's a constantly shifting, personalized creation maintained by consensus only at those infinitesimal points of overlap.
And it forces you to recognize that when you look at another person, you are seeing a version of them constructed by your own mind based on your inner beliefs about them. And that takes us immediately to the most humorous and yet most profound application of this theory in session 68.
Okay, we've established that physical reality is personal and multiple. Seth immediately applies this concept to the guest, Bill McDonnell, whose entity name is Mark. Get ready for the grand reality count.
The fun starts with applying the space continuum concept to Bill. So how many Marks are in the room?
Right.
First, there's the Mark constructed by Mark himself, his self-image. Second, the Mark created by Joseph. Third, the Mark created by Rupert. That's 3 physical distinct versions of Bill in the room.
But then comes the curveball, the detail that elevates animal consciousness in the most structural way possible.
Yes, there is a 4th Mark.
Yeah.
The Mark created by the cat, Willie.
The cat. That's just, it's more than a funny detail, isn't it? It's a profound structural detail about reality creation.
It absolutely is. Willie, the cat who was quiet before but then started sulking and crying out during the break, is confirmed to be a reality director.
Capable of creating a physical representation of Bill McDonnell.
Yes. The implication is massive. Animal consciousness is directly involved in constructing the human physical reality it perceives. If Willie can create a physical version of Bill, then Willie's perspective is a unique, exclusive space continuum in which Bill exists.
Seth joked that Joseph would be, quote, amazed at how many Marks we end up with.
And the final tally for the apartment, including the 3 people and the cat, is stunning. You have 4 physical Ruperts, 4 physical Josephs, 4 physical cats, and 4 physical rooms.
Yeah.
All existing simultaneously, just slightly overlapped and synchronized.
If that wasn't enough to shatter their grasp on linear reality, Seth provided a demonstration immediately following this theoretical discussion.
Right away.
Bill, the sensitive witness and artist, immediately announced what had drawn his attention during the earlier dictation, an image in the open bathroom doorway.
And Seth confirms the observation later.
I did indeed stand momentarily in the doorway.
Bill, being a talented artist, immediately grabbed paper and started sketching the figure he saw. He described it as primarily a silhouette, standing about 6 feet above the floor, backed by a foggy white background.
So Seth didn't just appear, he then provided this brilliant, lighthearted critique of Bill's initial sketch, which must have been just surreal for everyone in the room.
It was classic Seth humor. He admits he is no beauty, but then he says he's a much more cheerful-looking fellow than here portrayed.
Tuckles, that's right.
He points out that Bill missed a certain cast along the cheekbones, but then he praises Bill for capturing the smugness about the lips. Very good, that I am indeed rather pleased with.
That detail about the smugness makes the apparition feel so intensely personal and real. But how is this accomplished? I mean, how can Seth be speaking through Jane while simultaneously standing in the doorway?
He explains the mechanics of manifestation. He confirms this apparition was a construction he created using atoms and molecules. It was physical, but its motion and speed varied significantly from typical constructions.
So it was a feat of psychic energy management.
Absolutely. Seth was speaking through Rupert while simultaneously standing by in a construction and watching her speak. He had to manage 2 distinct energy processes at once.
And he also clarified the process for Bill, noting why the drawing wasn't perfect.
Right. The image was perceived first via Bill's inner senses, because Bill is highly sensitive to non-physical constructions. Bill then tried to translate that subtle, complex inner data into information recognizable by the slower, more limited outer senses.
And that translation process, that filtering mechanism, is what caused the distortion in the drawing.
Exactly. The visual result, the drawing, was the physical brain's best attempt to jam a multidimensional psychic construction into a two-dimensional physical form.
And Seth added that this specific type of construction is usually unperceived. It doesn't normally exist in terms of physical time or space.
Which means the fact that Bill saw it proves that the human perception mechanism is the main filter, preventing us from seeing these constantly shifting, parallel physical creations that surround us at every moment.
Okay, so if the appearance of Seth in the doorway was the theoretical proof, the second part of the demonstration was the practical, undeniable physical change that affected Jane herself.
And it was witnessed by two people simultaneously.
This happened during the break, right? Without any suggestion or warning from Seth?
Exactly. Jane, having shed her initial nervousness, was feeling great, recovered. She was standing in the doorway, the exact spot where Bill had seen the apparition, just clowning around and laughing.
The scene was set, sufficient room lighting, two focused observers, and Jane standing in the specific spatial location where the energy was densest.
And then, without any fanfare, it just happened. Both Joseph and Bill noticed Jane's features changing at the same time.
Talk about undeniable shared observation.
Right. The description of the change in Joseph's notes is so meticulous. The change was profound and distinctly male. Her jaw became more square, her nose enlarged, her lips became heavier and wider, and her neck thickened dramatically.
The whole cast of her features became heavier, almost monolithic.
It wasn't subtle at all. But this time, the effect was physical, much clearer, and witnessed by a third skeptical party. This confirmed for them that they were observing a genuine, repeatable mechanism of temporary materialization.
And the moment Jane moved just a few inches forward, the effect diminished and then disappeared.
Which indicates the spatial specificity of the manifestation. The energy was literally contained in that doorway.
The men also discussed Bill's initial drawing of the apparition, right, where he was fixated on the gigantic cranium of the image.
They did. While Seth didn't address the size of the cranium, Joseph offered an interpretation for the record. He thought the huge cranium might be symbolic of Bill's deep-seated feeling that Seth possessed greater or different knowledge than they did.
A subconscious reverence projected onto the physical image.
Exactly. But regardless of the symbolic nature of the cranium, the fact remains that a radical physical change in Ruber's face was witnessed by two observers simultaneously in clear light. It stands as the most tangible observational proof provided in this entire session.
And throughout this entire process, the manifestation, the feature change, the energy shift, Jane maintained that very deep, strong voice of Seth from start to finish.
Yeah, with no apparent discomfort. That speaks volumes about the energy and control Seth was exerting over the medium, the matter, and the psychic atmosphere of the room.
After witnessing a physical transformation, the logical question for any rational observer is, could this be explained away by suggestion?
Right. Did Bill and Joseph merely expect to see something, and their minds just supplied the image?
Exactly. Seth addresses this skepticism head-on, but he doesn't simply dismiss suggestion. He radically reframes it.
He does. He argues that suggestion isn't a trick or a psychological weakness. It's the fundamental mechanism of all reality.
It's the universal trigger.
Yes. Seth defines it beautifully, elevating its status from a psychological phenomenon to a cosmic law. He says, suggestion is no more and no less than an inner willingness and consent to allow a particular action to occur.
So if suggestion is inner consent, then there is no more truth or falsehood in saying his appearance was caused by suggestion than saying the room itself is caused by suggestion.
Exactly. All reality requires this foundational inner consent. He explains that our emotional feelings are the inner senses closest to the physical plane. These emotional directives filtered through individual expectations and attitudes are what form inner data into physical reality.
And if your attitude and expectation are negative, they can even form loathsome constructions. This sets the stage for the most powerful practical application of the session, a demonstration of pure, unconscious reality manipulation that happened at the new house they had just secured.
Joseph and Jane went to visit the new Birch house for the first time after making their initial payment. The front door was locked. They went around to the back and found the back porch door was slightly ajar. Joseph's notes emphasized that this door was heavy, sturdy, and most importantly, it was bolted from the inside by a secure arrangement. It was impossible for the wind or a slight tremor to open it.
So how did this heavy bolted door move? Seth gave them the definitive answer, which must have just floored them. He said, "You and Rupert both opened the door."
This is the definitive, practical proof of their joint unconscious co-creation. Seth explains that at that moment, they both intensely wished for the door to open, driven by excitement and desire to see their new home.
Mm-hmm.
And with the abilities they were developing, they brought psychic mass force, which is valid mass force, even in your physical world, against the door and opened it.
We have to pause and absorb the implications here. This wasn't a spiritual movement. This was telekinesis applied to a heavy, mechanically secured door.
Right.
A moment of intense combined inner desire, a joint suggestion or inner consent, translated into enough psychic mass force to pull back a bolt and move a heavy door.
It's the ultimate aha moment for you, the listener. It demonstrates that our capabilities are not limited to feeling good or thinking positive thoughts, but extend to literal, physical restructuring of matter through focused, even unconscious intention.
It means your attitude isn't just internal. It's a direct creative directive that interfaces with the willing atoms of the universe.
And Seth immediately used this confirmation to provide some really practical guidance. He reassured them about the financial anxieties surrounding the house and Jane's gallery job. He claimed that because they had achieved a positive shift in their inner attitude.
It's actually Joseph's view of the outside world.
Right. Their financial situation would improve due to inner expectation.
He also provided critical, specific health guidance for Bill McDonnell, whose lung health was a concern.
Yes, he did. Seth said Bill's lung would be excellent for the summer, but he must make concrete physical plans for living alone by autumn. If he failed to assure his inner self of this intention, this inner consent to autonomy, the physical symptoms would return.
That is the perfect link between psychological necessity and physical manifestation. Bill's inner self needed a change in living arrangements, and if the outer self didn't provide that inner consent and planning, the psychic force would manifest the old symptoms to force the change.
It just emphasizes how deeply integrated our emotional reality is with our material constructed reality.
Despite the density of the material, the dramatic demonstrations, and the deeply personal guidance, the session ended on a remarkably high, humorous, and enthusiastic note.
It really did. Jane maintained that booming, deep, strong voice throughout and reported no discomfort. And Seth, in turn, was clearly having a marvelous time.
He was definitely in a playful mood, particularly regarding Jane. Joseph noted that during the final delivery, Seth deliberately kept Jane from approaching the writing table where her cigarettes were.
Chuckles. Yeah, he was gently teasing his medium, preventing her from smoking until the last possible second.
And he didn't pull any punches on his medium's personality either, did he? Joking about Jane being a stubborn lunghead half of the time and a stubborn donkey head the other half.
It's high praise disguised as an insult, though, because he immediately adds, if we were not old friends, he wouldn't let me open my mouth. It just confirms their deep, long-standing connection and mutual respect, despite all the teasing. The energy was so dynamic and positive.
Before closing, they scheduled a fascinating experiment aimed at confirming their developing abilities.
Since Bill was going to Cape Cod for several weeks, the three of them, Bill, Jane, and Joseph, would attempt to contact each other telepathically at set times, making notes of their impressions.
They were actively seeking to prove their enhanced abilities across physical distance.
And the focus then returned to the new house and the promise of a celebratory gathering.
Yeah.
Seth looked forward to giving them a major housewarming party and a, quote, taste of my sense of humor that you will not soon forget.
He hinted at truly spectacular manifestations for this party, using references Joseph would recognize. He spoke of Joseph's past life as an old landowner in Denmark.
Right.
Seth suggested Joseph might look out his new windows and see a completely different scene, maybe a vision of Denmark or even a hilarious play reenacted in a barn where that land now stood.
He was hinting at reality overlays, just like the facial change, but on a vast external scale. He would literally shift their constructed physical reality to show them his playful power.
And he promised a housewarming gift.
A gift they may not see, but will know he has left. He says, you may not see it, but you will know that I have left it.
Something tangible yet non-physical. Maybe a palpable change in the atmosphere of the house, a sudden feeling of peace or abundance.
He was clearly reluctant to leave. He claimed he was departing out of compassion for two tired, misused, persecuted gentlemen, while making sure to mention he was also having a marvelous time keeping Rupert from his cigarettes.
It's a signature playful sign-off, confirming the high energy and profound control of the session despite the exhaustion Jane felt earlier.
And he even managed to squeeze in a prediction for Bill's trip. Seeing a man around 50 years old with prickly hair and a rowboat with a symbol on it. It just confirms his psychic focus was entirely clear and targeted. Everything leads back to high spirits, creation, and the promise of future phenomena.
So to synthesize the core lesson of Session 68 for you, it is a monumental confirmation that reality is fundamentally subjective, constantly constructed moment by inner willingness, attitude, and psychic mass force. The theoretical physics of the subjective space continuum were literally demonstrated not once, but twice to multiple observers.
Your attitude isn't just an internal mood. It is a creative directive. Your smallest expectations and deepest inner necessities can move physical dies, and the world you perceive is not solitary.
Right. It's one of 4 simultaneous realities you share just with the people and even the animals like Willie the cat in the room.
The discussion about the 4 physical marks begs the final provocative question Seth posed as he left, and it's a thought worth mulling over for the rest of your week.
What was it?
If there are 4 marks at present, what are the other 3 marks thinking of?
It's a fascinating question. How much of your perceived reality is truly singular, and how much is merely a localized, infinitesimally overlapped consensus? It suggests vast, parallel realities unfolding just outside the tight constraints of our current limited physical perspective.
We really encourage you to study the original texts to understand the full context of this incredible demonstration. This material comes from the Seth Material, and we highly recommend visiting the publisher New Awareness Network.
You can find them at their website and bookstore, sethcenter.com/their early sessions to find the early sessions book 2 and other seminal works.
We hope this deep dive into matter, multiplicity, and cats that create reality has given you plenty to think about.
Until next time, keep exploring your own space continuum.